So now we get to introduce one of my most favorite topics here, but it'll be a while before we actually get to evolution in depth, but we'll talk about it a little bit. So life is kind of based on DNA. It's that substance that carries your genes. Genes are the unit of heredity. They'll transfer the information from parent to offspring. DNA molecules that are grouped together are packaged into chromosomes. So that'll be something we'll talk about in the genetics part. Well, that's my pointer here. Okay, chromosomes. So DNA will be packaged into the chromosomes, and these will control all the activities of the cell. It's amazing what one long but incredibly small stranded DNA can do. I mean, it's long, but it's just incredible what that can do. Okay. A species' genes are coded in the sequence of the 4 building blocks making up the DNA's double helix. Isn't it incredible that the entire coding for your whole existence is based off of what sequence these letters are in? That's it. Just, 4 bases. Their code makes up everything. And it's cool because it's universal, because all organisms are going to essentially use the same code. I think there's maybe a tiny, very low percentage of things that actually deviate from that coding and use the same thing. And diversity of life arises from those different sequences. So although we use the same universal set of sequences, an incredible array of diversity comes out of those. So there you see it again, the DNA sequence, and it's just those 4 base pairs, right? It's just these 4 guys right here that make up our entire diversity. The little stepladder of life here. Okay. So we've got 3 domains here, so there's an enormous scope of this stuff in terms of organisms, everything else, so we need some sort of division in order to think about it. So there's a vertical division, and that's the size scale that stretches from molecule, this biosphere that we talked about, and then kind of a horizontal division across the great diversity of organisms. So if you think about biosphere, right, to what, ecosystem, to what do we have next? To the kind of community level, population, that kind of stuff. I'm going through the generals here, but as you get down, you'll get down to the organism. Well, the stuff that it's talking about here is the vertical. There's not vertical, the horizontal thing of the organism. So there's a great diversity along just the organismal plane here. So that would fit somewhere down underneath there, if that makes any sense. Promise you, if you're not listening to this, this makes absolutely no sense. But it might make some if you're listening. Okay. Diversity is the hallmark of life. I think that's in every sense of the case. Even with our species, it's important to have a lot of diversity within the species in case, the zombie apocalypse happens. We want some organism or some of our species to have some different traits that are the best, which will survive and move on to the next generation, which is always great. Okay. It's estimated that the actual number of species ranges from 10 to 100 million. That's a pretty extensive range there. It's not like, 10 to 11 million. It's like anywhere from 10 to 100 million. And I'll promise you, it's the tropics' fault. It really is. It's the tropics that do this. There's a lot of undiscovered stuff and the whole diverse rainforest and things where they're plentiful resources. It's hard to tell. Taxonomy is that term that we give to classifying organisms into broader groups and systems. This is probably something we'll get to in semester 2 is the taxonomy stuff, but we'll look at those. I have a couple of taxonomist friends. They are weirdos. Just saying. All right, the diversity of life is arranged in domains. There are 3 domains. 3 domains. It used to be a little bit different, but these are the 3 domains, and they're worth knowing. We'll get into this more later, but just so you know, there's bacteria, there's archaea, and there is eukarya. So bacteria are diverse, widespread, they're prokaryotes. Archaea are prokaryotes also, but the difference is the extremes. These are your extremophiles. They love extremes. Eukarya are the eukaryotic cells, so those are going to be some of your single-celled protists, and then all of the rest of your fungi, animals, plants, all that kind of stuff. All these guys are eukarya. Just means that they have cells that have a nucleus and various other parts. So we can look at the pictures of those things. Remember the bacteria up top. These guys are just your regular bacteria. Some you love, some you hate. These are archaea, your extremophiles, doing their really extreme weird things. And then this diverse group over here is eukarya, and you've got protists, those sort of single-celled but also kind of communal weird protist set. You've got plantae, so all of the plants. You have fungi, because they're super fun. And then all the cute animals, including the sloth, one of my favorites. Last thing that we'll look at just really quickly is that evolution explains the unity and diversity of life. So the history of life, again, this is stuff we'll kind of get into second semester at the beginning, but the history of life is documented by fossils, and it just shows that Earth is changing over billions of years, and that a variable cast of creatures has inhabited the Earth over a long period of time. Evolution accounts for life's dual nature. There's kinship and there's diversity, and evolution is really how we kind of get there. We'll say that evolution is kind of the mechanism, but the why and the how, those are outside the scope of our course. Okay, so, just looking at the fossil record, you get to see some really cool critters in there. I would encourage you to go to the Museum of Natural Science. You talk to any one of the paleontologists there, they will give you an incredible history on these dudes. Really cool, really knowledgeable people. I'm not a paleontologist. And then there's Mr. Darwin himself. Okay, we'll look at some of these pictures also, because there's lots of cute little animals that we can look at. The tortoise, the marine iguana, and then just the overview of the islands. But one of our favorite characters, Charles Darwin, published the book On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. Why his name is eluding me at this point, I don't remember, but there's a guy that he communicated with. I'm so mad I forgot. But anyway, there's a guy who came up with the same concept of kind of the origin of species at the same time Darwin did. And they didn't really step on each other's toes. They were pretty cool like that. But there were two guys who were thinking of this thing independently, and they just happened to crosstalk a little bit once they figured out that they were kind of on the same wavelength as far as thinking goes. Really cool story with that stuff, though. So a large amount of evidence supports the idea of evolution. Species living today are descendants from ancestral species, and that's what he called descent with modification. There's still loads of time at the end of the semester that we'll get to talk about that. It's really cool stuff. And then natural selection is that kind of mechanism to help make evolution go. And we'll clarify the differences between evolution and natural selection. One is a theory and one is not necessarily. So if we want to be real with it, natural selection is actually the theory part of it. Natural selection is kind of inferred, so it is the theory. But we'll talk about these in good detail later. So individuals in a population vary with traits. Many are passed from parents to offspring. The population can produce far more offspring than the environment can support. Okay. So that's kind of where you get the idea from. So there are varying traits, and some of them are just nicer for offspring. So, like, say for instance, like a peacock. Female peacocks tend to prefer males with big, fluffier, prettier tailage, because it's a sign of health and that kind of thing. So they tend to gravitate towards those males and make babies. And so that particular trait is having huge, beautiful feathers. That's that trait that's looking for it, and that'll get passed on. In a lot of populations, we can produce more offspring than the environment can support. So something will be selected against. So some things will be quote-unquote weaker, which just means they'll have a greater chance of kind of dying out before they reach reproductive maturity. And there are plenty of excellent videos for this that we'll get to look at. All these courtship rituals are really good, and then looking at kind of a predatory bird and the fact that it will pick things off that are not very fast at getting away from it. Okay. Here you go. Here's the evolution in action. We say we have some beetles of various colors. It's just a natural population. Some of these guys are darker and some of these are lighter. Well, if I am a really hungry bird, going nom nom nom, right? That's what's happening. Nom. Okay, it's going to pick off those things that it can see quickly and eat them first. So if it's hungry, it can see all of the white ones really well. So it's going to target these guys right here. And what will happen is that these will not be able to, pass their traits on to the next generation. And so over time, the population will become darker. And that's evolution, because we've essentially just changed the population over time. Change over time. That's all evolution refers to. By the way, what it says down here in the part you can't see is it says reproduction of survivors. So that those that survive the attack of cute little birdie here will then pass their genes on to the next generations. Okay. We're close to the end, I promise. That's the last little section. But from these observations, Darwin inferred that individuals with heritable traits best suited for the environment are more likely to survive and reproduce than less well-suited individuals. So as a result, there's unequal reproduction, or reproductive success rather, over many generations. So an increasing portion of individuals who have advantageous traits. So more advantageous traits increase in proportion. Just like the last one, it's advantageous to be a darker beetle. So we saw that the percentage of dark beetles increased, right? See, we had maybe 50-50 sort of above, and then below it's probably mostly dark, so 100%. So that's an increasing proportion of that advantageous trait. Okay, so the result there in evolutionary terms, I lost my cursor again. Okay, the result will be evolutionary adaptation, and this accumulation of favorable traits in a population over time. So more favorable, but essentially it's just change over time. So accumulation, or we could say change over time. By the way, delta means change. That's what the triangle is for. Okay. And just like some of these things are better suited for their environment, this beeth a mammal, and it's going to work really well for its environment. That nice sleek body is a favorable trait. The fins are an adaptable trait. I mean, it's going to have teeth. These are all good traits, and over time, this has become how the population has changed over time, which is going to look very different than this guy, which is suited for kind of a desert environment. You've got these thick plates, right, which help to kind of prevent water loss, but at the same time, this dude can roll up in a ball and, armor it up so that way certain predators can't injure it. And that's kind of where we'll stop. You can think about other examples of this. I would encourage you to think of other examples. Okay, yay! So write down some questions. We'll talk a little bit in class about some of the stuff that we've talked about so far. We'll move on from chapter 1 and kind of finish that up as a group together. And then we'll move on for chapter 2, and I'll have some of those things up for you very soon.